I've sat in the same pew at Grace Hill Baptist every Sunday for 14 years. Same spot, 5 rows from the front, left side, right next to the stained glass window with the shepherd and the lamb. I could find that seat blindfolded. That church has been my second home since before my daughter was born, since before I even said "I do" to the man I thought I'd grow old with. But on March 9th, I didn't sit in my usual spot. I was running 7 minutes late, and the only open seat was in the very last pew, tucked in the back corner where nobody sits unless they're visiting or trying to slip out early. I almost didn't go at all that morning. I wish I could tell you that sitting in the back row was some kind of divine plan I understood in the moment. I didn't. It felt like nothing, just a small inconvenience on an ordinary Sunday. But that one small change, 7 minutes and 20 rows back, cracked open a secret my husband had been keeping for 6 years. It destroyed my marriage. It exposed a man I thought I knew better than anyone on this earth. And it connected me to a woman I had never met. A woman who had been living inside the same lie I was, loving the same man, raising his children, and calling him by a name that wasn't even real. My name is Corinne Bellamy. I'm 41 years old. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I've spent the last 19 years building a life I was proud of. I work as a pediatric dental hygienist at a small family practice on the east side of town. I'm the person who calms down nervous 5-year-olds and convinces them that the fluoride rinse isn't so bad. I love my job. I'm good at it. I've always been the steady one, the one my friends call when they need someone to listen, the one who brings a casserole when someone in the neighborhood has a baby or loses a parent. I don't say that to brag. I say it because I need you to understand the kind of life I had before that Sunday. It was ordinary. It was full. I thought it was honest. My husband, Wendell Bellamy, was 43. We met at a barbecue at my cousin's house the summer I turned 26. He showed up in a blue button-down with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and he brought a pecan pie he swore he baked himself. I found out later his mother made it, but by then I was already falling for him. Wendell was the kind of man who filled a room without trying. Big laugh, warm handshake, the type who remembered your name after meeting you once. He worked as a regional sales manager for a farm equipment distributor, covering Tennessee, Kentucky, and part of southern Indiana. That meant he traveled a lot. 2, sometimes 3 weekends a month, he'd pack his overnight bag, kiss me on the forehead, and head out to meet dealers or attend equipment expos. I never questioned it. Not once. He always called before bed. He always brought something home for our daughter, a stuffed animal from a gas station, a postcard, a funny magnet for the fridge. He was present even when he was gone. Or at least that's what I believed. Our daughter, Jovi, had just turned 12. She's quiet in the way that sharp kids are quiet. She watches everything, absorbs everything, and then says one sentence that cuts right to the center of whatever everyone else has been dancing around. She got that from my mother, not from me. I'm the one who talks too much when I'm nervous. Jovi is the one who sits still and sees. She adored her father. Sunday mornings, she'd race him to the car. He'd let her pick the radio station on the drive to church. They had their own little world, and I loved watching it. That was one of the things that made what happened so much worse. It wasn't just my heart that got shattered that morning. It was hers too, and she didn't even know it yet. She was home that day with a stomachache, sitting on the couch with my mother, Opal, who had driven over to help with Sunday lunch. Jovi almost never missed church. If she had been there, sitting in our usual pew, Wendell would have seen her the moment he walked in. Everything would have played out differently, but she wasn't there, and I was sitting in the back, invisible, watching my husband walk through those double doors with a woman and 2 children I had never seen before in my life. He had his arm around her. The little boy was holding his hand. They moved together the way families do, the easy, practiced rhythm of people who have done this 100 times. And I stopped breathing. My vision tunneled. My fingers went numb against the hymnal in my lap. I was about to stand up, walk down that center aisle, and tear his world apart in front of 200 people. But before I could move, a hand closed around my wrist. A woman I had never met leaned close to my ear and whispered 5 words that changed everything. The real show's about to start. To understand what that Sunday did to me, you need to understand what my life looked like before it. Because from the outside, and honestly from the inside too, everything was good. Not perfect. I never trusted perfect, but solid. The kind of life you build one small decision at a time, and then one morning you look around and think, I did all right. Wendell and I got married in June of 2010 at Grace Hill Baptist, the same church where everything fell apart 14 years later. My mother, Opal, made my veil by hand. My father had passed 2 years before the wedding, so my older brother, Fenwick, walked me down the aisle. He cried harder than I did. Wendell stood at the altar in a gray suit with his hands clasped in front of him, and when I reached him, he leaned in and whispered, "Took you long enough." The whole front row heard it and laughed. That was Wendell. Always light, always easy. He made everything feel like it was going to be fine. The first few years were sweet in the way early marriage is sweet when both people are still trying to impress each other. We bought a 3-bedroom house on a quiet street near Powell, close enough to my mother that she could drop by but far enough that she had to call first. Wendell was climbing at work, picking up new territory, earning bonuses that let us finish the basement and put in a deck out back. I was building my patient list at the dental practice and starting to feel settled in a career I genuinely loved. Then Jovi came along in 2014, and the center of gravity shifted the way it does when a baby enters a house. Everything got louder, messier, and more beautiful all at once. Wendell was a good father. I need to say that clearly because it makes the rest of this harder to explain. He wasn't absent, he wasn't cold, he changed diapers at 2 a.m, he walked the floor with Jovi when she was colicky and I was so tired I couldn't see straight. He coached her little league team when she was 8, even though she quit after one season because she said the pants were itchy. He showed up. That's what made the betrayal so disorienting. It wasn't that he was neglecting us. It was that he had enough energy, enough charm, enough careful planning to give us a full life while building an entirely separate one somewhere else. The cracks, looking back now, were there. I just didn't have the language for them at the time. About 2 years before that Sunday, Wendell and I hit a rough stretch. He was traveling more than usual, and when he was home, he felt far away. We'd sit at dinner, and I'd ask about his week, and he'd give me short answers, like he was reading from a script. I told myself it was work stress. The equipment industry had been volatile. Dealerships closing, new competition from overseas manufacturers. He said the pressure was getting to him, and I believed it because I wanted to. We went to a couples retreat that Reverend Toomey organized at a lodge outside Gatlinburg. 3 days of guided conversations, prayer sessions, and long walks around a lake. On the second night, Wendell broke down. He told me he'd been feeling pulled in too many directions. He said he was afraid of losing me. He held my hands across the table and said, "You're my home, Corinne. I just need to get my head right." I thought that was a turning point. I thought we'd walk through the fire and come out stronger. Now I know he was just recalibrating the lie. He got better at hiding it, and I got more comfortable not looking. The morning of March 9th started like every other Sunday. I woke up at 6:30, made coffee, and checked on Jovi, who was curled up in bed with her hand on her stomach. She said she felt queasy. I pressed my palm to her forehead. No fever, but she looked pale. I told her she could stay home. My mother, Opal, was already on her way over. She had planned to cook a pot roast for Sunday lunch, and she arrived at 8 with a grocery bag in one hand and a paperback novel in the other, ready to settle in. "Go on to church," Opal told me, waving a wooden spoon like a baton. "I've got her. We'll watch something trashy on television and she'll feel better by noon." I almost stayed. I was tired and the couch looked inviting, and there was a part of me that didn't feel like getting dressed. But something nudged me out the door. Call it habit, call it obligation, call it whatever you want. I grabbed my keys, drove the 12 minutes to Grace Hill, and pulled into the lot at 9:07. The service started at 9. I was late. The parking lot was packed. I circled twice before finding a spot near the back fence. I walked in through the side entrance, the one near the nursery, and slipped into the last pew on the left side. Nobody noticed me. The worship team was already into the second hymn. I picked up the bulletin, opened my hymnal, and looked up toward the front of the sanctuary, and that's when I saw them. 5 rows from the front, in my section, in my church. My husband sitting shoulder to shoulder with a woman I had never laid eyes on, with 2 children pressed, close between them. Wendell's arm was draped across the back of the pew behind her, his fingers resting on her shoulder like that was the most natural place in the world for them to be. I watched the little boy lean into Wendell's side. I watched Wendell squeeze his shoulder without even glancing down. It was automatic, practiced, familiar, the kind of touch that only comes from years of doing it. Everything I believed about my life began to collapse in the time it took to draw one breath. My body understood before my brain did. My hands went ice cold, my jaw locked tight. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat, so hard I was sure the woman sitting 2 seats over could hear it. The hymnal in my lap slid to the floor and I didn't pick it up. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. I just sat there in that back pew, staring at the man I had shared a bed with for 14 years, while he sat with another woman and 2 children like they were posing for a family portrait. The little girl, maybe 5 years old, had her head against Tamsin's arm. She was wearing a yellow dress with white flowers on it. The boy was older, maybe 8, and he was sitting straight up, legs swinging because his feet didn't touch the floor. He turned his head to say something to Wendell, and that's when my stomach dropped so hard I almost doubled over. That boy had Wendell's jaw, the same square set, the same slight cleft in the chin. I had traced that jawline with my fingers 1,000 times in the dark. I knew it better than I knew my own reflection, and now I was looking at it on the face of a child I didn't know existed. My first instinct was to stand up, march down that center aisle, and grab Wendell by the collar of his shirt. I wanted to scream his name so loud it bounced off the stained glass. I wanted every single person in that sanctuary to turn around and see what I was seeing. I wanted him humiliated, the way I felt humiliated, gutted the way I was being gutted in real time. I started to stand. My legs were shaking, but I pushed myself up off the pew with both hands and took one step toward the aisle. That's when the hand caught my wrist, not rough, but firm enough to stop me. I looked down and saw a woman sitting at the far end of my pew, silver hair pinned back neatly, wire-frame glasses, a navy cardigan buttoned to the top. She had sharp, steady eyes, and she was looking right at me like she already knew every thought running through my head. "Sit down," she whispered. "I know what you're seeing. I know what you're feeling right now. But sit down. Stay calm. The real show's about to start." I almost ripped my arm away. Who was this woman? Why was she touching me? How could she possibly know what I was feeling? But there was something in her face, something behind her eyes, that wasn't hostility. It was recognition. She looked like someone who had already been through the explosion I was about to cause and had come back with a plan. I sat down. I don't know why. My body just obeyed her before my anger could overrule it. She leaned close, keeping her voice below the sound of the organ. "My name is Dorrit Pace. That woman sitting next to your husband is my daughter, Tamsin." The words hit me in layers. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Dorrit kept talking, quiet and controlled, feeding me information in small, precise pieces, while Reverend Toomey preached about forgiveness 20 rows ahead of us. She told me that Tamsin had been in a relationship with a man she knew as Glenn for 6 years. Glenn told Tamsin he was divorced, that his ex-wife lived out of state, that he had no contact with her anymore. Glenn told Tamsin he worked in agricultural consulting and traveled for business. Glenn had been there for the birth of both children. The boy, Luca, was 8. The girl, Wren, was 5. He had signed their birthday cards. He had shown up to Luca's school play last fall. He had helped Tamsin put up a Christmas tree in December. Glenn was Wendell. Wendell was Glenn. My husband had built an entire second life in Paducah, Kentucky, complete with a different name, a different story, and a woman who loved him just as blindly as I did. "How did you find out?" I whispered. Dorrit's eyes didn't leave the back of Wendell's head. 3 weeks ago I was visiting Tamsin. He left his jacket on the kitchen chair when he ran out for milk. I found a receipt in the pocket from a jeweler here in Knoxville. The name on the receipt was Wendell Bellamy, not Glenn. I looked him up that night after everyone went to sleep. I found your Facebook page within 10 minutes, your wedding photos, your Christmas card with your daughter, everything. I felt the room tilt sideways. 14 years. He had looked me in the eyes for 14 years and lied without flinching. He had held my hand at that retreat in Gatlinburg and told me I was his home, while another woman 100 miles away believed the exact same thing. I told Tamsin, Dorrit continued. She didn't believe me. She said I was jealous. that I never liked Glenn, that I was trying to ruin her happiness. She refused to look at anything I found. Dorrit paused and turned to face me fully. She won't believe her mother, but she'll believe his wife. I sat there for what felt like an hour but was probably less than 2 minutes, turning Dorrit's words over in my mind while the congregation sang the offertory hymn around us. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get up, walk to the front of that church, and tear Wendell apart in front of everyone he had ever shaken hands with. I wanted to watch his face crumble. I wanted every deacon, every choir member, every Sunday school teacher to see the man behind the mask. I wanted destruction, pure, public, scorching destruction. But Dorrit was watching me with those steady eyes, and something in her expression cooled me down just enough to think, not forgive, not accept, just think. Because she was right. If I stormed up there screaming, Wendell would do what Wendell always did. He would perform. He would manage the room. He would pull me aside, lower his voice, and start spinning a story so smooth I'd be the one who looked unhinged. He'd done it before on a smaller scale, every time I'd questioned a late night or a charge on the credit card I didn't recognize. He always had an answer. He always stayed calm, and I always ended up apologizing for asking. Not this time. This time I wasn't going to give him a stage to perform on. I was going to let the truth do the work. "What do you need me to do?" I whispered to Dorrit. She had already thought it through. She told me to go outside and wait by the front steps. When the service ended and the congregation filed out, Wendell would walk through those double doors with Tamsin and the children. He wouldn't know I was there until it was too late to rearrange his face. Tamsin would be standing right beside him, and I would introduce myself. Not with screaming, not with tears, just with the truth and the proof to back it up. I nodded. My hands were trembling against my knees, but my mind was getting sharper by the second. I stood up slowly, tucked my purse under my arm, and walked down the side aisle toward the back exit. Nobody looked at me. The sermon was winding into its final stretch, and every head was turned toward the pulpit. I pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped into the March air. It was cold, colder than I expected, and the wind hit my face like a slap. I welcomed it. I needed something to keep me from falling apart before this was over. I walked to my car first. My hands fumbled with the keys twice before I got the door open. On the dashboard, clipped to the sun visor, was a small framed photo of me, Wendell, and Jovi from last Christmas. We were standing in front of the tree at my mother's house. Jovi was wearing reindeer antlers. Wendell had his arm around my waist. We looked happy. We looked real. I grabbed that photo and held it against my chest for a moment, then carried it with me back to the church steps. Then I pulled out my phone and called my mother. She picked up on the first ring, the way she always does, like the phone is permanently attached to her hand. "Corinne, church out already." "Mama, I need you to listen to me." She went quiet. My mother knows my voice better than anyone alive, and she could hear the fracture in it before I said another word. I told her everything. Wendell in the pew, the woman, the children, Dorrit, the second name, all of it. It poured out of me in one breathless rush, and when I finished, the line was silent for 3 full seconds. Then my mother spoke, and her voice was made of iron. "Corinne Renee, you listen to me. Don't you fall apart in that parking lot. Don't you give that man the satisfaction of seeing you crumble. You stand up straight. You hold your ground. I am getting in my car. Right now, and I will be there in 15 minutes. Do you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Is Jovi okay?" "She's with you, Mama. She's asleep on the couch. She doesn't know anything. I'm going to ask Fenwick's wife to come sit with her. I'll be there soon. Don't you move." She hung up. I lowered the phone and pressed it against my forehead, standing at the bottom of the church steps with that Christmas photo in my other hand. The parking lot was still. A cardinal landed on the church sign near the road, bright red against the white lettering. My grandmother, my father's mother, used to say that cardinals were visitors from heaven, sent by people who love you to remind you that you're not alone. I watched that bird for a long moment. It tilted its head, looked right at me, and then flew off toward the tree line. Inside, I heard the organ begin the closing hymn. The service was ending. In a few minutes, those double doors were going to open, and 200 people were going to pour down these steps. And somewhere in that crowd, my husband was going to walk out with his other family and come face to face with the life he thought he had buried. I straightened my back. I held the photo at my side, and I waited. The double doors opened, and the sound hit me first. Laughter, conversation, the shuffling of shoes on wood floors. The congregation spilled out the way it always does after Sunday service. Clusters of families greeting each other, old men shaking hands, women adjusting their hats against the wind. I stood at the bottom of the steps with the photo pressed flat against my thigh, my fingers gripping the frame so tight the metal edge was cutting into my palm. I didn't feel it. I didn't feel anything except the drumbeat of my own heart echoing inside my skull. I scanned every face that came through those doors. Deacon Prewitt and his wife, the Nauman family with their 4 boys, Sister Graylark from the choir still humming the closing hymn. One by one they passed me, nodding, smiling, not knowing they were walking out of the last normal Sunday Grace Hill Baptist would have for a long time. Then I saw him. Wendell came through the doors with Tamsin on his left and the 2 children in front of them. He was laughing at something she had said, his head tilted back slightly the way it does when he's performing charm. Tamsin was smiling up at him. She had her hand resting lightly on Wren's shoulder, guiding the little girl down the steps. Luca was 1 step ahead, hopping down the stairs with the restless energy of a boy who'd been forced to sit still for an hour. They looked like a catalog family. They looked like everything I thought I had. Wendell hadn't seen me yet. His eyes were on Tamsin. But Tamsin saw Dorrit first. Her mother was standing to the right of the steps, arms crossed, face unreadable. Tamsin's smile faded immediately. "Mom, what are you doing here? I told you I didn't want to talk about this anymore." Dorrit didn't answer. She just looked at me, and Tamsin followed her mother's gaze down the steps to where I was standing. That's when Wendell looked up. His eyes locked onto mine, and I watched every muscle in his face rearrange itself in real time. The smile vanished. The color left his cheeks like someone had pulled a drain plug. His mouth opened halfway and then closed again. I had never seen Wendell speechless. In 14 years of marriage, I had never once seen that man without a word ready. But right now, standing on the top step of Grace Hill Baptist with his 2 separate lives 3 feet apart, Wendell Bellamy had absolutely nothing to say. I walked up the steps slowly. I didn't look at him. I looked directly at Tamsin. She was younger than me, mid-30s, auburn hair pulled back in a low bun, a green blouse that she'd clearly chosen with care. She had kind eyes. That was the thing that almost broke me right there. She had kind, unsuspecting eyes. I held up the Christmas photo so she could see it clearly. Me, Wendell, and Jovi in front of my mother's tree. "My name is Corinne Bellamy. That man standing next to you is my husband. We have been married for 14 years. This is our daughter. Her name is Jovi, and she turned 12 in October." Tamsin stared at the photo. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked at Wendell, then back at the photo, then at Dorrit. I could see her mind working, cycling through denial and recognition and horror all at once, trying to find the version of this that wasn't what it clearly was. Wendell stepped forward. "Corinne, let's go somewhere and talk about this. This isn't what it looks like." Tamsin's head snapped toward him. "Glenn, why is she calling you Wendell?" The name landed like a brick between them. Glenn. The fake name. The invented man. I saw Tamsin's face change as 6 years of memories recalculated behind her eyes. "Your name isn't Glenn," she said. It wasn't a question anymore. Wendell reached for her arm. "Tamsin, just let me explain." She pulled away from him so hard she nearly stumbled on the step. Wren grabbed the hem of her mother's skirt, confused, looking up with wide eyes. Luca had gone completely still. Tamsin looked at me one more time. "How long?" she asked. 14 years, I said. "Since before your son was born." She nodded once, the kind of nod that means a person is holding themselves together with everything they've got. She took Luca's hand in her right and Wren's hand in her left and walked down the steps without another word. Dorrit met them at the bottom, placed her hand on Tamsin's back and walked them toward her car. Tamsin never looked back at Wendell, not once. Wendell turned to me. "Corinne, please, just let me explain. It's complicated." I held up one hand, palm flat, and said the last words I would ever speak to him outside of a courtroom. "You can explain to your lawyer." Behind me, I heard a car door slam and tires crunch on gravel. My mother's sedan pulled into the lot like a warship entering harbor. Opal stepped out, walked straight past Wendell without looking at him, wrapped both arms around me, and said loud enough for the entire parking lot to hear, "Come on, baby, you're done here." Reverend Toomey appeared at the top of the steps. He had watched the entire thing from the doorway. He walked down slowly, placed a hand on Wendell's shoulder, and said in a voice that was quiet but carried no warmth, "I think it would be best if you didn't come back for a while, Wendell." Wendell stood alone on the steps of Grace Hill Baptist, with his hands at his sides, and not one person in that parking lot willing to look him in the eye. My mother drove me home because my hands wouldn't stop shaking long enough to hold the steering wheel. Neither of us spoke for the first 5 minutes. Opal kept her eyes on the road and her right hand resting on top of mine in my lap. She didn't need to say anything. Her being there was enough. When we pulled into the driveway, she turned off the engine and looked at me for a long moment. "You did good, Corinne. You held your ground and you told the truth without losing yourself. Your father would have been proud of you today." That's when I finally cried. Not in the church, not on the steps, not in front of Wendell or Tamsin or anyone else. I cried in my mother's car in my own driveway with the engine ticking and the March wind pushing against the windows. I cried until my ribs ached and my throat burned and there was nothing left to push out. Opal sat with me through every second of it. She didn't rush me. She didn't tell me it was going to be okay. She just let me fall apart in the one place where it was safe to do it. When I walked inside, Jovi was sitting on the couch with a blanket over her legs and a glass of ginger ale on the coffee table. Fenwick's wife, Lorene, was in the kitchen pretending to wash dishes, but I could tell from her face that my mother had called her on the way home and told her everything. Jovi looked up at me and I watched her expression shift from casual to concerned in half a second. "Mom, were you crying? What happened?" I sat down next to her and took her hands. I told her a version of the truth that a 12-year-old could hold without being crushed by it. I told her that her father had not been honest with me about some very important things. I told her that he and I were going to be living separately. I told her that none of this was her fault, that her father loved her, and that she was allowed to feel however she needed to feel about it. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she leaned into my side and whispered, "Are you going to be okay, Mom?" I kissed the top of her head and said, "I'm going to make sure of it." The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. I filed for divorce 8 days after that Sunday. I didn't want to drag it out. I didn't want negotiations over dinner tables and mediated conversations in lawyers' offices. I wanted it clean, fast, and final. My attorney, a sharp woman named Petra Voss, who came recommended by a friend at work, uncovered financial discrepancies that Wendell had hidden for years. Payments to a P.O. box in Paducah, a second phone plan under a different name, monthly transfers to an account I never knew existed. Every thread she pulled revealed another layer of the lie, and every layer worked in my favor during the settlement. Wendell tried to call me 4 times in the first week. I didn't answer. He sent a long text message that started with, "I know you're hurt," and I deleted it without reading past that line. I wasn't interested in his explanations. There was no version of a 6-year double life with a fake name and 2 secret children that can be explained into something acceptable. Some betrayals are too engineered to be forgiven. About a month after the divorce was filed, Tamsin called me. I almost didn't pick up. I didn't know what she could possibly want to say, and I wasn't sure I had the energy to hear it. But I answered, and her voice was quiet and steady in a way that told me she had rehearsed this call more than once. "Corinne, I need you to know that I had no idea. He told me his name was Glenn Doss. He told me he was divorced and that his ex-wife moved to Oregon. I believed every word. I built a life around a man who didn't exist." "I know," I said. "Your mother told me. You and I were living in the same lie, Tamsin. There's nothing to forgive between us." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry I existed in your life the way I did." And I told her, "You didn't do this. He did. We haven't spoken since. I don't think we need to." That one phone call closed something between us that needed closing, and we both walked away from it a little lighter. Dorrit sent me a handwritten letter 2 weeks later. It was short, written in neat, slanted cursive on cream-colored paper. She thanked me for how I handled the confrontation at the church. She wrote one line I will carry with me for the rest of my life. "You gave my daughter the truth without cruelty. That is a rare and generous thing, and I will never forget it." It has been over a year now. Jovi is doing better than I expected. She sees a counselor every other week, and she has started asking hard questions about her father that I answer as honestly as I can without tearing him down in front of her. She deserves to form her own understanding of who he is. That's not my job to shape. My job is to make sure she knows she is loved and that honesty is not optional in the lives of the people you care about. I still go to Grace Hill Baptist every Sunday. I sit in my usual spot now, 5 rows from the front, left side, next to the stained glass window with the shepherd and the lamb. Wendell has not been back. Reverend Toomey told me privately that Wendell moved to Nashville. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. People ask me sometimes if I wish I had sat in my regular pew that morning, if I wish I had never seen them, and the answer is no. Not for 1 second. I sat in the back row because I was 7 minutes late, and those 7 minutes gave me something that 14 years of marriage never did: the truth. It was ugly, and it was brutal, and it nearly broke me. But it was real. And I will take a painful truth over a comfortable lie every single day for the rest of my life. Trust your eyes, even when your heart is begging you not to. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, I want to ask you a small favor. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. Leave a comment and tell me what you would have done if you were sitting in that back pew. Would you have confronted him right there? Would you have waited like I did? I want to hear your answer. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share this video with them. Sometimes the story that changes someone's life is one click away. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.